Hello, everybody. It's another Sunday night, and that means it is time for another episode of Explain Yourself. We have some great comics to look at and some great creators to talk to, so I'm glad you're here. Let's bring in our guest. Uh, he's been here before. Aaron, how's it going? It's great to have you back.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been going great. Very busy with
Yeah,
the
I know how that
Kickstarter and
goes.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so Aaron is here to promote Amor Patris,
Yes.
which is a supernatural horror. Aaron, why don't we just start off? Tell us about Amor Patris.
Amor Patris is
Sorry.
Latin for is Latin for father's love. It is
Okay.
a supernatural horror that, if you like The Exorcism, The Exorcist, The Nun, any kind of supernatural horror films or TV series, this is definitely up your alley. It follows a local sheriff of a small town who answers a dispatch to a local farm, and he finds blood, death, madness, and his investigation into what happens slowly unearths that exorcisms are real and not all look successful.
Oh, wow. Okay. So if I remember correctly, you're a big Stephen King guy, right?
Yes, I do like
Okay.
a lot of his stuff. I'm actually writing a novel
Mhm.
which kind of ties into this, kind of Stephen King, kind of same universe,
Mhm.
kind of. So I'm kind of in the editing phase of that. Um, so hopefully, watch this
Yeah.
space.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's a very just that description is like I'm thinking like that is just so Stephen King. The sheriff and the sort of remote location and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Very cool. And of course, it has that exorcist kind of. I assume there's kind of a church component there if there's exorcisms
Yes.
and stuff, and
Yeah.
sort of
Because
need a little bit
in
of the omen and stuff there too.
the issue one kind of throws the reader straight into it with
Mhm.
what happens at the farm, and issue two is um, kind of starts explaining what's going on. The sheriff asks a local priest for advice and like and the investigation kind of unearths that a father and son duo who are
Mhm.
performing unsanctioned exorcisms across America.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, man. Yeah, I don't know if that's that's good or bad, but
yeah,
no, it's definitely intriguing. I like the idea that there is. You describe them. I don't know if they're good or bad. I mean, you'd think that that's a pretty good profession, or at least in stories, they tend to be the heroes. But that wrinkle is very intriguing. Before we really get into it, I want to mention this campaign is doing pretty well. Has a little bit of way to go in the last 4 days, but
yep.
if you anybody watching this on YouTube, the link is right down in the description. So if you scroll right down, you can click over this campaign and back this cool project. Um, but yeah, so definitely a really interesting premise. Mentioned Stephen King a little bit, but what were maybe some of your other influences in kind of putting together this story?
I'd say most of them were like films,
Mhm.
especially like The Exorcist. Like I said, The Nun,
Mhm.
Conjuring as well. I wanted to kind of feed into the horror suspense that because you kind of with comics you kind of have to you fall into several categories, but two of them, the main ones, are either gory
Mhm.
or like suspense, and I wanted to feed into the suspense. And luckily I found an awesome artist. Hernan Gonzalez is incredible, and his use for shadows in the backgrounds, especially as you can see
Mhm.
here, is phenomenal. And I think it really feeds into what I want for this comic.
Mhm.
And yeah, there is some gory bits in it, but it's more kind of for tasteful for the story rather than
Mhm.
just like in your face, to shock you. Um, but yeah, they're the kind of main um, kind of themes I kind of went with for inspiration, and it kind of wrote itself. To be honest, it's one of those projects that was relatively easy. I think I only wrote it in a couple of months, and then obviously edits after that. But it didn't take long to kind of get the main storyline down.
Mhm. Yeah, it's great when that happens. I mean, I'm writing. I was actually that's why I was in here a little bit late. Is I'm actually shifting one of my comics stories. I want to do like a small video game project to support the next campaign down the line.
Okay.
So I'm learning Unity and some C++, plus stuff, and it's a lot. But the story itself, literally, just I think I just sat down on a Gmail document and wrote the whole thing, and it was like good. I mean, I think when you have a story that just spills out of you like that, I mean, boy, that's the nicest thing in the world. So it's always cool when that happens. I think it's easier too to keep track of your like logistical plot elements and your arcs, and you don't get caught up in things that you cut but you sort of remember and the reader doesn't. I mean, it's always a great thing, I think, for everybody when it happens.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I'm not a big horror movie fan. I do love The Exorcist. More because my parents would talk about when people went to see that in the 70s, they would like, I know it was kind of a marketing gimmick, but they said there were nurses on hand because people were throwing up or fainting during the thing. I think that their description of it, I think actually my mom, this is when she was really young, so she hadn't met my dad yet. But the guy that, I mean, she must have been really young in high school or something. The person that took her to see that movie fainted, or like literally just lost his marbles.
All
Uh,
right.
and I think I was scared of that movie because of the reputation, because I just thought that must be just so unbelievably scary. And I'm Catholic, so I guess I'm a little bit prone to
Yeah.
find that disturbing too. But I think what I'm getting at here is the atmosphere of that movie is what really is haunting and frightening more than your sort of Friday the 13th slashery stuff. And I think that's why the stuff like this, and especially when you have artwork like this,
Yeah.
that's so dark and works for the story. I mean, it can really be disturbing.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
I like the way I prefer the supernatural horrors is because it's very rarely anything to physically interact with or touch. Where like a
Mhm,
slasher, you have the dude or dudes or whoever it is that you can like physically put down, you can arrest, you
mhm,
can, kill. Where a spirit is an entity, you can't physically like shoot them in the shoot them.
mhm,
You can't stop them. So you have to think outside the box and how it plays out. So that's what I like, and I think that's more scary in that it's very hard to win.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such an interesting plot structure too. I remember talking with some friends, God, a long time ago now, but I was saying like I don't really like stories like that. I think they were describing some movie at the time that was kind of like what you're describing. It's a supernatural force. All you can do is survive it, not defeat it. And I
Mm.
thought, as far as creating story, we were talking about writing stories and things, and I said I don't really gravitate to that. The plot structure of it just doesn't agree with me. And my friend jokingly said, "Well, it's not like the Phantom, Ben. You can't just slam evil all the time." And I don't know if you're familiar with it. There was a movie in the '90s called The Phantom, and the poster it was actually a pretty good movie. The poster was very silly, and its tagline was "Slam evil," as he would like punch towards the viewer in the ads.
Mhm.
And I think that is actually, as I grown older and written more things, a really good structure because it's a little bit of just not necessarily an escape plot where you're just running and you hope to get away from it, but I think there's just inherently a little bit more uncertainty for the reader when you're not dealing with the kind of three act like hero structure type thing,
Yeah.
where you sort of know what to expect. And even when there's a wrinkle in the plot line that's not what you expected, you sort of know it's almost like, oh, okay, they could have zigged and they zag. Instead, even when it's unexpected, it's a little bit expected. And I think a structure like that that's more open ended is really haunting. And I think when it's done with a lot of atmosphere, like this artwork has, works really
Oh
well in
yeah.
comics.
Yeah. It's I'm like I said, I'm very fortunate to for showed interest in this. He
Mhm,
because he did a few variant covers for me for
mhm,
my other series, Blood and Fire, Ice and Bone. Again, horror elements, so
mhm,
like a samurai action horror. Um, pretty much everything I write has some kind of horror in it. um, but yeah, I kind of sent him the script after we really hit it off really well with the variant covers, and he loved it. It is a 10 issue finished storyline.
mhm.
So this is for the second one. Um, so yeah, there's a few more to go, but hopefully we'll get there and finish this off.
Yeah, I think you will. You're pretty close, and I think you're just entering that like last few days bump period.
I'm
While yeah, when you're doing it on a Monday too, which is not to jinx it, but I think you're in a good spot, and it's yeah, I just think that stuff like this. I was never a big fan of horror in comics in some respects. I mean, I think things like, to the extent that Terminator is like a horror comic, you could, but has elements that you could lean towards the more comic booky aspects of it. It works.
Mm.
I think slasher stuff actually could work better in comics than most of the stuff I've seen. I've seen a few indie comics that do it really well. But Grandma Chainsaw, for instance, by Alan
Yeah.
Dunford and some friends, I think really works.
Yeah, I've got that.
And but stuff like this is, I think, really hard to do. But I've seen it done a few times. In fact, I was reading Sean Gordon Murphy's Batman White Knight series again a couple weeks ago, and there was a moment in there that actually made me sort of gasp. It kind of depended on you knowing a few things about the characters. There was a point where Commissioner Gordon was talking to someone who he thought was Batman in this sort of alternate universe. It's Azrael, who's a bad guy here. He's talking to some vigilante with a cape in the shadows, thinking it's Batman, and these claws reach out and get him. I'm like, oh my God, that was like a jump scare in comics that was actually effective. It was really good. And I think that there is like a lot of cool stuff you can do, with page turns, with just unexpected things that can be really fun. So tell us a little bit more about the sheriff character that we're kind of building the story around. Kind of, where's he start off in the story, and where's he kind of going?
He starts off in the story right there when he's getting a 6-pack of beer, looking forward to ending his day because he's had one of those god awful days that never seem to end. So he's just about to head home when dispatch calls. He sent two deputies to a disturbance, and they haven't heard from them. So unfortunately, he gets the call to go and investigate what the hell's going on, and that's where the story kind of picks up pace with what happened at the aftermath of the it's an exorcism gone wrong, probably because the carnage that's happened, and you kind of follow the investigation of what happened and why as well. The father and son duo are highly, very key people involved as well, because they performed the exorcism, and you kind of find out why it went wrong, and it leads to the Vatican as well. They get implicated because they, everyone knows they, sanctioned the exorcisms from, hundreds of years ago. I think they researched that back to like 1604, I think it is. That's when they started writing the actual public, rites of the exorcisms. So it kind of dives into that. I do keep it tasteful. So I know Catholics are very heavy into this, but it's tasteful. It's it kind of branches away from religion in a way. So yeah, I love the way it's turned out. The first issue is amazing. I'm very proud of it, and Hernan's artwork is phenomenal.
Yeah, it really is. It's so suited. And it's a shame Daniel Torres, who was going to be on with us tonight, but he had to bow out due to some computer issues. He has, I think, a very similar looking comic, which I'll kind of show a little bit.
He's got the same artist.
You're kidding me.
No,
I didn't know that.
I was gutted when you said he wasn't coming on. I was like, oh my God, that would have been so cool. Because I'm
as an artist, I'm a little sad to hear that we're going to be talking about this one artist the whole time, and they're not here. So maybe we'll see if we can get him on. I had no idea it was the same person. It looked, obviously it was similar, and it was black and white and heavy on the shadows. But wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, very same cool. Artist. Yeah, I'm really looking for. I'm following his campaign. It looks phenomenal. I can't wait for it to launch.
He's been posting a lot of stuff on the Indie Creators Discord there and everybody's just blown away by those pages. They were like really cool. So, and I think these, obviously look just very similar. And I didn't know the reason why they look so similar until now.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Very cool. It's cool to see you doing something that, and I kind of asked you this before with your other book about the research into the period. And I thought you had, kind of the approach I take is like, you look into it a little bit, but unless you're just really into like placing a certain historical event, you were kind of looking for the atmosphere and stuff like that. I know that the Catholic Church is not real. They don't do exorcisms that much, if at all, anymore. I mean, it's kind of a quiet thing that's kind of
Yeah,
shrouded in a little bit of mystery. Obviously, it's catnip to writers and creative people. It's such a dramatic, crazy thing.
yeah.
So there's always going to be stories about it. Did you do a lot of research into kind of how the Catholic Church deals with this, if they still do it, and to what extent they do, kind of their attitude towards it, and did that
I
kind of inform the story?
yeah, I researched to the point to basically get facts. Like
Hmm.
when they last, like here, 1614 was the last date they, officially did the rites of exorcisms.
Hmm.
But actual practicing, I didn't because my story kind of takes place in America,
Hmm.
where I imagine a lot majority of the Vatican's business is probably Europe and things
Hmm.
like that. So um, I've tried to obviously kept it as tasteful as I could, but with the story as it is, it gets pretty dark and gloomy, and there are possessed
Hmm.
entities in this where as the story progresses you find out. I don't want to kind of spoil it, but the the father figure definitely is very key, and his son,
Hmm.
and you find out why the Vatican have been keeping tabs on them, because
Hmm.
he was a priest in the Vatican. He was actually performing was being trained up to be an exorcist,
Okay.
and he left. Well, he was forced to leave, and there's a few backstories of why that happens and everything. So it's all contained in the 10 issues.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's I'm looking forward to it. It's been a struggle because this is a relaunch because
Mhm.
I launched it last year. Unfortunately, I mistakenly did it while there's an election and around
Oh yeah, we were a little
Thanksgiving
busy over here.
and
Well,
yeah,
you're
it
here
was
now. Actually, you're in Kentucky, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I thought that was you.
Yeah, I've been
Um,
over here 6 years, so it probably wasn't the best best time to launch a Kickstarter.
yeah,
We
pretty
almost
hectic
got
time.
there.
Actually,
Just hmm,
I went in. I think I started mine in like late November, um, which conventional wisdom is that it was done. But I thought it was like, yeah, it's going to be the hangover from the election will be over, and people will be looking for some kind of normalcy no matter how it goes. So yeah, it's hard to predict the
yeah,
timing of that stuff. It really is.
it is.
Um,
So I mean, this is I've already passed the previous launch. I got
mhm.
to 92 backers, so I'm one above. Yes. So we're getting there. We're getting there.
That's something I always, as a creator that's doing this stuff, I've always kind of been more focused on backers than the amount. I mean, obviously that's important. It determines if you can do it or not.
Yeah,
But like my biggest goal when I started out with this was to build an audience. I wanted to hopefully just get people that liked my work,
yeah,
kind of vibe with the stuff that I do and the way I approach things, and really just try and build on that and build on that, because I think that's what really leads you to the type of success that could sustain a career in
yeah.
whatever comics is going to end up being in the next few years, which I
And
think is going
strangely, like issue two is usually the
to. Mhm.
hardest to get funded, which is
Yeah.
surprising. It's like I didn't realize that until someone pointed it out, and yeah, it's true. Number two is one of the hardest. You'd
Oh, I
think the
saw a
first one was.
huge dip on my first. I did really well my first campaign, and my second campaign was less than half in
Mm,
dollar amount, and I think substantially lower with backers too. And I didn't promote as heavily as I had. I attributed it to that, but I think that was just it. And then I really hustled on three and got it kind of in the middle.
yeah,
But yeah, big drop off on two.
yeah.
That was
The
rough.
first one seems to go really really well, and then it drops
Hmm.
off, like you said, for Sue, and then it kind of rises and then kind of peters out.
Hmm.
Um, well, that's what I've found with and other creators have as well. So yeah, it's strange. You'd think people who like the first one would come back for the
Hmm.
second one, and you just kind of see an upward trend. But
Yeah.
no, the second one is notoriously harder to get, you know, funded than the first one. So as I'm proving,
That's interesting because I didn't know that. I've never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense. because when I didn't do nearly as well in my second campaign for Scarlet Twilight, and I attribute it to like everything else. So I wasn't promoting as heavily. Maybe I thought I was coasting a little bit there in retrospect. I also thought my cover was a little weaker, because my first cover I thought was really strong. It looked good, and it, I think, described the concept really holistically. It gave you everything you were going to get, and was attractive in that way. In my second one, I had a villainess, so she was kind of scantily clad, and I thought, oh, that'll just crush it. But I didn't draw her to be that. I drew her as the villain. I didn't draw her to be that like sexy or anything like that.
Mm.
And I think that, so I kind of thought, oh, this will do well. And I don't think I was leaning towards like the actual story elements of it, not the things that would actually be appealing about it. So I really attributed it not doing as well to that. To hear that there's a specific issue 2 drop off. I know that kind of happens in the direct market, but I didn't know that was as true here on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I've noticed it myself. I think it really depends on how long in the business you've been as well. So
Yeah.
if you've got like a big fan base already, that obviously helps.
Mhm.
But like with kind of newish guys like me, I'm constantly kind of hoping to bring out a new project. Like I'm working on one right now, which is a science fiction horror. Like it says, I seem to dabble in horror quite a lot. So I'm kind of putting that together. Not sure when I can launch it though, because I'm hoping to finish Ice and Bone
Mhm.
3 and 4 together.
Mhm.
Launching that in August, hopefully, end of August. So after this is Enenra number 7, and then going on back to the Samurai. So I've been busy.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I'm bouncing between 3 different projects for
Yeah.
comics in addition to everything else in my day job. And I always feel like I'm just running. I love this one so much. I want to do that. It's hard to sit down and schedule yourself and say, hey, actually, this one needs to be done first and concentrate on that,
Yeah.
while still keeping your enthusiasm high for the other ones, especially because for me, it just takes so long to draw that it slows things down too. But we'll get into a little bit more of that in the second half of our show, because we kind of get more into the back end, kind of how you put these comics together and market them, sort of thing. You said something that was really interesting to me about the exorcisms. So you said that I kind of thought there were more exorcisms being done, I guess, in more modern times. But you say the last one they did was like officially was in the 1600s.
No, that's when they wrote
Oh,
the
okay.
actual rights. And then
Okay,
they
like
came,
this is the plan. This is what you do
yeah,
when you
yeah. This is
expelling
how
a
you
demon.
perform the exorcism, and then they
Gotcha.
rewrote it not long ago, like I think the 1990s, 1994 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
They rewrote it for the modern times. I mean, how often they actually do
Hmm.
exorcisms, like he says, is a very closely guarded secret.
Yeah.
I think they kind of go out now to disprove it is needed before they
Yeah.
perform it. So finding evidence of it was like a next to impossible that I
Hmm.
found. So it was like, okay, I'll just kind of go to sites where it kind of shows certain rites of the
Hmm.
exorcisms and things like that, um, and then kind of feed that in as and when into the book. But generally speaking, though there's exorcisms that take place in the story,
Hmm.
most of it is investigating, why and
Hmm.
how it happened and how they got there, and so it's more from a non-religious, because the sheriff isn't a religious guy, so it's kind of seeing it from outside in, as it
Hmm.
were.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's got to be so interesting in terms of. I mean, I'm Catholic and I don't know anything about exorcisms. Thankfully, I don't think you really want to know too much about it. Something's gone very wrong if you really find yourself on that road. I would have to think, though. I'm sure there are tons of like sub communities online that are like, we think an exorcism happened here, and I just imagine that's like a totally wild thing
Yeah,
to research, even just to do a little research, to kind of make the story work, or to do some cursory stuff. You must have gone down some pretty crazy rabbit holes looking into this. I can
It
only
was,
imagine.
yeah. I kind of had to pull myself back and say, "All right, enough. I have enough for my story. I don't have to go further in." I mean, uh, God help me with someone looks at my search history.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's something that's kind of weird about the sort of I don't mean to suggest that exorcisms are conspiracy theories, but I think that the type of people that must follow that online or build Facebook groups or whatever wherever that exists, people that are into it, I'm sure there are a lot. It seems very much in the vein of conspiracy theories, where the type of person that would be drawn to that would kind of be there. But the thing I found about that stuff, and this is true of conspiracy theories or just stuff that gains steam online, is that it's kind of a focus group almost in what is compelling. If you look at some stuff like that you find, it's crazy, and you don't actually believe it. But I found when I look into that stuff, I can see why people are interested, and I feel like there's probably a million people making up weird things that aren't true, but certain things stick and gain steam, and other people believe them or amplify them. And I
Yeah.
think it's almost like a focus group on what types of things are compelling, what gets clicks, what draws eyes. And I
What's the
think that's
curiosity as well, of
yeah,
unknowns? Like, if no one knows why this happened, people
mhm,
automatically want to investigate it and research it and find out why it happened. I mean,
mhm.
they could be logical explanations, but if science can't answer those questions, then people make their own minds up.
Yeah, yeah. It's a weird mix of stuff being, I think, having a little bit of plausibility, like, well, yeah, I could see why that's weird, which draws you in. And then there was some fantastic element, and you get involved in that. And then
Yeah,
you really see. I kind of noticed as conspiracy theories have gotten to be a bigger part of our, I guess, public discourse or whatever you want to call that. As a person who writes stories, I've been super interested in it, not necessarily for the individual mythologies I think they kind of promote, but when you see like what really gets people's blood pumping, what gets people, what sort of like people follow and amplify and build upon, it's almost like this crowdsourced story. And if you look at some of the more popular ones, it's a pretty good story in terms of like structure and drawing people in. There's a book I read a few years ago called The Bestseller Code. It was interesting, but it was really long, and it had like a central premise I thought was cool, which is essentially that if you take chapters of books, and the way they're constructed and certain points of like a character being uncertain or scared or triumphant, that there's a really pleasing pattern, and that the books that are bestsellers mostly adhere to that pattern. And the writers were, I think they were college professors, and they kind of looked at books that really that they were basing their thesis on. Okay, you start the story with a chapter that starts with a character here, they go here and here and here, and they kind of found patterns that persisted among popular books. And then 50 Shades of Grey came out, and one of their central theses was that fantasy and erotica don't do well. And Harry Potter and 50 Shades of Grey were like the top selling novels at the time. They fed that kind of through their model, though. The beats of the story for both of them, in terms of just character momentum, ups, downs, things like that, emotional journeys, fit their model perfectly. So while the content, they didn't really sync up to their model, they almost found that their real beat structure, it really supported that. And I think that there's something about stories like this, or just things that could happen in our world but are fantastic and have a fantastic element, really tie into that. And when it's done well, it just captures people. And I think
yeah.
exorcisms are one of those. I mean, just totally one of those things.
I mean, I think because the fact it actually happens
Hmm.
in real life as well, and it's
Yeah.
very closely guarded secret of when it happens and what happens behind those closed doors.
Hmm.
It leads to a lot of people like the films, to
Yeah.
kind of exploit that unknown to feed into, especially into the horror element, to scare people
Yeah.
that people love. And hopefully I tap into it as well.
Well, I think so. I mean, that's what like the Catholic Church doesn't. It's kind of like, look, we don't. I feel like there's a I don't want to call it, the best word I can come up with is embarrassment or
Mm.
like disdain. They're like, guys, we don't really do a lot of that. It's mostly, it's in the movies. It's not real. It's not what we're about. It's not their mission
Yeah.
overall. But it obviously does happen. They do have it. And I think when you have something like that, that is there is a monster in the closet sometimes. And then also B, shrouded mystery, and they don't like to give out a lot of information. Like that's just,
Yeah.
that's just mental catnip. Of
And
course,
when you
everyone's going to be like, "Oh, what is that?"
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about it. Like all the ghost stories you've heard, all the
Hmm.
thousands of different people of of like things moving or you know apparitions and things like that. The thing you have to think about of like all the tens of thousands out there that have told this story. If you think about it, if 1% is true,
Hmm.
you still have to think, well, then how what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Um, So there's always that element of like it could be true, what is actually happening out there, and science can only explain so much at the moment.
Hmm.
Um, so you don't know what happens when you die. No one does. People who have died and come back have say they see the lights, they see figures and stuff, and it kind of leads into the afterlife kind of scenario
Hmm.
of like what happens when you die. But you know, there's always that unknown, and you know, writers feed into that as as much as they can, and I think that's part of it because it could be real. It
Hmm.
gives that element, that extra element to the horror that
Hmm.
shit, this could happen. This could be real, and the exorcisms do, like you said, do technically happen
Hmm.
with the Vatican. They don't publicize it because, like you said, I don't know the right words. It's not like you said, not ashamed, but embarrassed. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
maybe a little embarrassed.
Yeah. I was
Because
struggling
they, don't-
to
do
think of
they
how to
do
say
not.
that as well.
Yeah, they do not like to talk about it.
Yeah. Which
But
of course makes it just more like, oh,
yeah,
what are they hiding? Like,
yeah. I mean, if
um,
they just came out and said, right, this is what we do, you know, 9 times out of 10, the individual is maybe psychotic or
mhm.
some kind of delusional, and we kind of feed into the delusion to help break it. Also, maybe that's part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but because they've said they do exorcisms limitedly, obviously, but the fact that they haven't explained what happens is, it's a mystery.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what your job as a writer is, especially when you're doing stuff like this, is to kind of harness that sort of interest that
Yeah.
we have. Okay, there's this really crazy thing. We don't want to talk about it, but it exists.
Mm.
Of course, everyone's mind is just going to be racing at that. And I think when you do stuff in this genre, it's sort of a trick of how do I manage that mental momentum people have where they just, there's this big appetite to know about this because it's not like somebody saying no, it doesn't exist, it never happens. They're actually conceding it happens, and then you have to manage that kind of information flow in a way that works for your story, works for your characters, but also just feeds into that primal thing that, hey, there's a scary threat. I'm not being allowed to know about it. I mean, I think that's just such a red meat for a writer. Is that something that really drew you to the genre?
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, especially this one is because there's so much that potentially could, I mean, I could finish this 10 issue arc
Mhm.
and then, you know, maybe do a prequel of another exorcism,
Mhm.
exorcism that the father and son perform. I mean, I've kind of just set this out from start to finish as a standalone
Mhm.
storyline. Um, but you never know. In 5, 10 years' time, I might decide to revisit it. Um, you never know. Amazon could come calling, asking for the rights to make it. I'm free. I'm
Well,
available.
here's hoping. Here's hoping. So I have a question about that. I want to take a quick break though and play a couple of messages from some of our partners. So we'll be back in just a second.
Okay.
Click that mouse and warp into all age.
I hope we'll be back in a second.
Click that mouse and warp into All Ages of Geek's website, your ultimate portal to everything geek culture. Here you'll find articles that speak your language, from the latest anime buzz to the coolest tech trends. Our mission, to celebrate geekdom in all its glory. Whether you're a gamer, a comic enthusiast, a 90s kid, or an anime aficionado, we've got something for you. Dive deep into them with All Ages of Geek.
Your comics take a lot of time and effort to create. Way too much to have them get damaged while shipping to your backers. Gemini Comic Supply mailers keep your comics safe in transit, and with the code GeekCollective10, you can get those mailers with 10% off your order. That's GeekCollective10. Enter it at checkout to get 10% off.
All right, and definitely I can attest to that. I think I said this last week, but I just bought a huge chunk of Gemini mailers and bags and boards from there. Used the code and took a big, it's ended up saving I think $50 or $60 by using that code. So it takes so long to make these comics. It's a shame for them to go out to your backers and not be put together well and get damaged. I mean, some of that can happen, but you should obviously take every step you can to prevent that. So can't recommend that enough, and also can't recommend enough the All Ages of Geek. I mean, there's just there's so much content out there. It's really awesome when you see people that are passionate about what they do and have a lot of good stuff to just look at every day. So definitely, if you're into the type of stuff we are, you should head over there and check them out. But Aaron, to get back to horror and how you manage all this stuff and what you're doing with it, it does. I mean, just from what little you've described, and I don't want to have you spoil anything, but just kind of the threads you've described. You've got this older sheriff, you've got the Vatican, you've got this father and son combo who are, I think, really intriguing, given their, the role you've kind of set out in their story. I can definitely see after you get done with this 10-issue story arc, I feel like that's the type of story that obviously a ton of really crazy stuff happened before this took place. I think just with the father-son, the fact that he's a former priest and now has a son, obviously something happened there. I mean, there's a lot of, I think, just what you've described, not necessarily with the concept of exorcisms, which of course is intriguing, but the characters you've described, I think have a lot of unanswered questions that are really interesting too. So I definitely can see where this could expand in, going forward and going back and all that.
I mean, I have thought of one thing I could do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is just an idea that once this is done, maybe do an anthology and have different creators think of stories for the father and son to do, and then they can do their own twists on it, on their own exorcism story if they really keep with the theme, and obviously, but if other creators would be interested. It's just a like an off the wall kind of idea I had. But I mean, there's a lot of avenues this could go. I mean, I could even do a sequel. I mean, if the idea comes, I get inspiration. You never. I mean, like at Blood and Fire was supposed to be a 3-issue done, and then I couldn't let go, and then I made Ice and Bone, which is its sequel, and people seem to be loving it. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing when I think you've created a good world setup, which is to say you've got a very interesting concept, a kind of atmosphere people like, but then also you've got some characters that have legs, that have a past. And I think that's kind of the sign of a good character is they have baggage that you reveal in interesting ways from before your actual story begins. That's what makes it fun. That's what makes them compelling. But then, of course, when you set that stuff up as a writer, I mean, at least I found, even when I thought, like, I'm not going to go back to that at all, or I had no plans to, like, you're in the shower and you think of something, like there's like, oh, yeah, this would be cool. And that builds and builds until it becomes some other big project. Yeah. And I think you've kind of set this up in a way where you're, like I said, you've got this compelling world and central concept. But the father and son duo, I mean, that is also just it's the plot of like every other show on TV is somebody going from place to place and getting an adventure of some kind. And I think that lends itself to that. And you've also got the father-son dynamic, like how do each of them feel about what they're doing or what they want the other one to be doing. There's just a lot of good stuff there, a lot of meat and potatoes for a writer to exploit and create interesting arcs out of.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely potential. I mean, once this storyline's finished, then I'll probably have a break. But
10 issues is a lot. You deserve a break.
Yeah, 10 issues is a lot. And hopefully I'll be doing trade covers for them. So I do have a publisher doing it. So they are waiting for the trade covers before you can actually get the physicals in shops. So the only place you can get physicals at the moment is on the Kickstarter.
Nice. Well, so that actually, it's always a challenge for me to not talk about creative stuff the whole time, especially when Joey's not here. So you get into the marketing and the sort of nuts and bolts of how you put a book together, but you kind of conveniently steered it towards that. So you're working with a publisher on this.
Yes.
How did that happen for you? And what were their kind of interest in the story? And like, do they just want to do the trade, or do they want to do single issues? Like, kind of how did that go?
The relationship actually started a long time ago, because I actually joined them with Enenra, my first comic. I wrote that as a TV series. So I got onto their books, tried to shop it around. It didn't get much traction, but one of their agents said it would make a kick-ass graphic novel. And I'd never done comics before. Didn't really read them, to be honest. I was more of an anime kind of guy, animation, X-Men, that kind of. And I kind of went, okay. Luckily, they had Ezekiel on their books. He was doing some art for them. And we hit it off really well. The first issue actually took so long because he was drawing off a TV script, not a comic strip. So I had to revamp everything. Big difference.
We talked about that last time, but there's a lot to be done there.
Yeah. So I revamped everything to make it nice and streamlined, so it's a lot more efficient. And then I've kind of been back and forth with the kind of owner guy, and he kind of reached out, what am I doing, blah blah blah, and I kind of sent him some stuff. Sent him the script for this and the first issue, which had been completed through Kickstarter, and he loved it. And it says that, have you got a publisher for it? And I said, no, not right now. And their publishing side, they're opening a comic branch, and they picked it up. So they're pushing it digitally at the moment, and then I'm planning on 2 trades, the 6th issue and obviously the 10th issue. So the 1 to 6 is going to be a trade, and then 1 to 4 is going to be a trade, because 7 to 10 is going to be a trade.
I'm pretty good at basic math, but I certainly understand when other people aren't. It's not
because the last 4 issues are going to be bigger. They're going to be, I think the smallest is 32 pages, and the biggest is around 44. So though there's the smaller numbers, I think the page at the end is quite similar to the trades. So that is the plan. They're really looking forward to it. They keep asking me, like, how's it going? With the Kickstarter.
I get those emails too.
Yeah. But they've been very supportive of the Kickstarter as well. And even so, they're actually asking me to help them with some of their projects that they're looking at maybe kickstarting too. So watch this space.
I think that's awesome, because I think I work with Red 5, and I've had such a good relationship with them, even through a kind of change in. They're fantastic, and I reread so many horror stories, even like private stuff on like Discord, where just people are so unhappy with their publishers. Sometimes, in general, I'm not mentioning anything specifically, and I almost think like, man, how have I gotten away with having like such a great experience with Red 5? They've been
Yeah,
so fantastic.
I mean, I've Blood and Fires with Red 5,
Yeah.
and they're itching to start getting Ice and Bone out there, but
Mhm.
obviously they need to wait for it to finish before they
Sure.
can promote and get the first issue out to shops. So yeah, it's so two's finished, kickstarting. Ezekiel is working on the art right now, so I'll be hopefully getting that done, lettering done, and printing, fulfill the Kickstarter, and then jumping literally straight into 3 and 4 once Ezekiel's finished with an Enra.
Mhm.
So luckily his schedule is pretty flexible this around
Mhm.
now, and I asked him, can you go from Ice and Bone to Enra to back to Ice and Bone? And he goes, yes. So I'm happy.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I was getting at with the thing about Red 5 is it's great to find, and I think this is so important for indie creators like us, especially with how everything happened with Diamond this year and is still
Yeah.
happening. I think publishers that are like open to working with creators that do crowdfunding, because not all of them are, is just so important. Because I think that as a creator, you really need to do that to build an audience. You need that to bring some money in to actually create these projects, and to just solely focus on the direct market as that's your only thing. I think as an indie creator, it's very hard to make work. I don't know how that would work now, with comic shops being the way they are, and then certainly now the distribution being so uncertain.
Yeah,
So
it's
I
going to
think
be
that,
interesting. Yeah,
oh yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's going to be
100%.
interesting to see how the market, how comics kind of settles down
Yeah,
with Diamond. I mean, did have they been bought out, or are they still?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I see. I have a big project at work that's been eating up most of my time, and so I just see stuff on Discord, and I see things out of context. I don't really have time
yeah,
to go to Bleeding Cool and read like a more, or the Beat, and read like a concise breakdown of everything.
yeah,
So I guess the short answer is I do not know, but I've just seen like, well, how it affects this person or that person,
yeah,
and in just spurts here and there. But yeah, it's definitely going to be. I know that Massive has that thing where they're putting some creators out. I think another publisher is doing something similar, that maybe just was announced in the last week. But yeah, I think we're in a state of flux that, and of course, I looked at it, and I think probably you do too. Is like, okay, that's great, but I'm the creator. I need to find a way to make this work for me. That may not be just solely focused on stores right now, because stores are in a tough spot, and they kind of just need to sell Batman and Ninja Turtles for the time
yeah,
being.
pretty much. Yeah, yeah. They need to make money too. They need to
Yeah.
make pay the bills. I imagine, God bless them, but I mean, it was tough to begin with, let alone
Yeah.
after this fiasco.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I did a lot to try, and I've actually talked to other creators that have done a little better in the direct market. I've done a lot of things to try and get my one book did pretty well. The other one I thought would actually be stronger. I did a lot to try and get it to work, and it didn't work out that well. But you also really have to think about where these stores are coming from. It's a tough time, and I know some stores don't even order new comics unless they're pre-ordered from the customers, which tells you kind of where things are. And I think as a creator, you have to really just be cognizant of that and think, about how you build up the point is to create these things we want to create, and foster an environment that supports creative work, the type that we do. I think that it's great to to bring it back, is like publishers that are supportive of that. And because in stores, I think too, I think there are some stores that are very hostile to people doing Kickstarter, but at the same time, I have to think at some point it's a good metric of, hey, can this person draw a crowd? Can he or she find an audience that is willing to follow their books? I think that's going to probably even out in a way that everyone's pretty comfortable looking at crowdfunding as, hey, if someone does well there, they can probably adapt that story and their audience to things that will also work well. It'd be a good barometer of what will work well in the direct market.
Well, also it cost a fortune to make a comic. It's not cheap. I mean,
unless you draw it yourself.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
it takes time.
I could draw it,
Yeah.
unless if you like stickmen. But other than that, I am not an artist, and even my stickmen are probably not the greatest either.
Yeah, stickmen can be fun, but they are limited. Actually, I just saw a
Yeah.
really cool Kickstarter game that was just stickmen fighting, and I thought
Oh,
it's crazy how
yeah,
much they get out of that. It's still fun.
yeah, I saw. Must have been a couple of years ago, 5 years ago. There was like like a YouTube video of just stickmen fighting on
Mhm.
like it's like a platform, and
Yeah.
and then they were like decapitating heads and like shooting like John Wick, and then it was actually really cool. So,
Yeah, I mean,
but like
yeah, I
facial
love that stuff.
expressions, there's not really much to a dot.
No. No, I mean, but it really, I mean, to kind of bring it all around before we wrap up, I mean, when you see those things that are stick figures, but they're really good, and actually, this is ancient history and internet time, but when I was like graduating college, there were these video games somebody made that was a stick figure fighting other stick figures, kind of a ninja John Wick
Yeah,
situation, but they were compelling and fun, and they were great content. And it's as a comic book artist, you really look at that and think like, how do they make something that simple so much fun to just watch and appreciate and
yeah,
follow? And I think that's something that I've always had in mind as I'm drawing things and kind of writing things to then draw, to keep an eye on what makes that fun, what makes every panel fun and every movement fun. And I think that's something that when we look at horror stuff like what you're doing here, uh, I think it's you're kind of working the same muscle, and that you've got a compelling circumstance and some good mysteries and some sort of like stress points for the reader that you need to exploit in really pleasing ways. I think that's something where when you're doing stuff, especially like horror, I think you really have to be on the pulse of the reader. And from talking to you and looking at these pages, it sounds like that's kind of been your something maybe that has been incorporated in your approach.
I try. People have liked the first issue,
Mhm.
who have read it. I think it's trying to get it out there and to
Mhm.
the right people and the niche fan base
Yeah.
is proving a bit more challenging. Everyone loves samurai. Everyone loves post-apocalyptic.
Mhm.
Supernatural horror is a kind of a niche area. Um, but I'm fingers crossed, with this if this funds and I'll be able to kind of broad, make the storyline broaden and get into in issue
Mhm.
3. I'm hoping it'll start taking off. Like I says, issue 2 is notoriously hard to get
Mhm.
funded. I'm almost there. I've got 4 days left, so fingers crossed.
I think that's a good place to leave it. And just to reiterate, if you're watching this now, you can go down in the description, click on that link, and get right over to this. If you're watching it later, you've got 4 days, and definitely head over there and check this out. Just so people know, are you doing late pledges on this one?
Yes,
Okay.
there is late pledges.
All right.
Um, some of the tiers you won't be able to do, like the be in the comic.
Mhm.
My highest tier, obviously with Hernan drawing the characters. Once the Kickstarter ends, that's taken off. But the rest of them you will be able to get, up until really I stop printing. Just or so maybe a couple of weeks before that, just so I can get the numbers in and finalize everything. Um, so yeah. But I've had a few late pledges on my last campaign, so I'm doing it with this one too.
Very cool. And as you can see, if you're watching this, scrolling through a lot of really cool rewards here. The highest one being drawn into the story. So that's obviously a lot of fun. I'm going to do that with my next campaign, and I'm a little nervous about doing the likenesses, but
Yeah,
see how it goes.
it kind of hit and miss. Some campaigns people have backed it, some
Mhm.
haven't. I mean, I did charge more last time purely because you'd get like a print
Yeah.
of your character, but I've taken it out, so it's a bit more reasonably priced, to get your. I mean, you can, as a side note, ask for prints of the pages you're in.
Mhm.
so they can be negotiated how many you want for friends and family. But yeah, it's people seem to some seem to dig it, some not. But I mean, I know it's a bit pricey, $200, but you're in the comic. How can you say no?
No, I think it's fun too, especially if you can offer them that page.
Yep.
I think that makes it a really fun thing to do. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And you have T-shirts, you have some stickers, you have a lot of cool stuff here.
Yep. Like the upgraded ones is for metal covers. You literally get 2 comics for the price. You get the metal cover of whichever tier you choose, and you also get the normal comic as well of that tier.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let me run through a few other things before we wrap it up. So I mentioned my campaign. I guess I'll just do that first for being a smoother transition. So We Are Scarlet Twilight Part 1 is going to launch pretty soon. I'm fulfilling Countdown to Cobalt Crisis. Say that 3 times fast. I have about 30 or 40 people left to get packages out to, and I should wrap that up this week. And then I have to finish up the first issue of this, at least the line art, and then we'll be off to the races. So We Are Scarlet Twilight was a kind of retro post-modern comic. I kind of took some of the Golden Age stuff and re-examined it through modern eyes, but I want to say it was like my attempt to be really earnest in appreciating the cool things about Golden Age comics. I wasn't sure I was going to go back to the well and do another one, but these ideas just kept coming at me, and I had a really good approach when I was reading Crisis on Infinite Earths a couple years ago, and thought, actually, if I took the ideas I had, made it like Crisis, but in the style of Golden Age comics, that could be something really cool, worth doing, and something people hadn't seen before. So I'm really excited about something like Crisis on Infinite Earths or Secret Wars being done in that older style. And you get all those epic events, but also the atmosphere of the pulps and those old cartoons. So I'm really pumped about this one. We have the first issue cover done. I wrapped up a couple weeks ago the alternate cover for this, and the story is written. I couldn't be more excited about it, and we should be going pretty soon. So if you're watching this and you're into that stuff, head over to that link, get on the pre-launch list, and you'll hear when we go live. Next one I want to get to is Angel Hunter, who will probably have Richard Davis, the creator, on in a couple weeks to discuss this one. But really cool stuff. I get kind of an anime vibe or like an early PlayStation game vibe from this. It's a really cool looking comic, has some really good concepts, and I'm definitely looking forward to talking to him and digging into this one. But you can head to the link in the description and get on this pre-launch list as well. Next one I'm going to get to is Cutting Room Floor. Daniel was going to be on tonight with us, but had some computer issues that he couldn't make it. But we'll probably have him on as well again soon. This one's really cool looking, has a ton of good atmosphere, much like Aaron's book. Which I didn't know why it was so similar, but now I do. Just really cool stuff. Very excited to hear more about this one as well, and just cool stuff.
Yeah,
so again,
this one looks really cool. I'm one of those 147. I'm looking forward to this.
Definitely, and you can be the next if you click over there and get on this list as well. The next one is I Share Your Skin, which Joey at Geek Collective is working on with a bunch of other great creators. Really cool stuff. I've seen some artwork from this. Some of this is posted, some of it's not. Great covers, a really cool concept. We talked a little bit about this last week, and it's going to be a really fun book. I know Joey is super pumped about it. Alan Dunford, who's working on it as well, has got some great contributions to this. So everyone's really excited about this one. I think it's going to be great, and definitely head over there. The actually pre-launch followers on this one have exploded in the last week. So definitely want to get in that list. I think this is a book everyone's going to want to follow. Really fun stuff. And I think that will do it. Stop sharing. So that'll do it for this week. Aaron, thank you for coming on and talking about your book. It's great fun.
Okay. Thank you for having me again.
All right, and just before we leave, is there where can people find you aside from just the Kickstarter link to the book?
You can find me on Instagram at Wroblewski Aaron. I'm generally on there most days. I do have Facebook groups for all my series, Enenra, Bloodfire, Isobone, and Amorpatris. So yeah, just find me there, and I usually post updates, mostly posts about Kickstarters upcoming or live, and like teasers for upcoming events. So yeah, check it out.
Very cool. All right. I guess we'll leave it there. I hope everybody watching has had as much fun talking to Aaron as I have. It's been a blast. And in the meantime, check out all these comics, and we will see you next week.